You're already behind. I want to get started. All right. Okay, so we're live. All right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining our panel discussion. We have a whole lot of favorite and people that I appreciate and respect on this panel. We're gonna get them started. We are. I apologize for being late. We had a little technical difficulties we had occurred. So for I'm going to introduce our panel to all of you guys. We have Amos Simmons, who is I am blessed to have him upon on this discussion panel. He is a part of equality, and C is a very, very, very good movement. I want you to be a part of that upon this panel discussion. We have my spiritual father, Pastor Michael Shannon. He is very powerful in the trans community. Very spiritually connected with the trans community. I have Achim Howard. I respect him so much that he is a very very strong voice in the trans community in Washington. I can't hit with you. And I also have Jermaine Lee with me. He is a very, very spiritual and outspoken person in the community with the gay community. He's also very spiritually with the spiritual community. So let's get started, fellas. How you guys doing today?
Pretty good, considering.
All right, yeah, considering everything that's going on and things like that, yeah, I do understand. Let's start with the questions. Basically, this gonna be basic on where we go from here. That's basically okay. So my first question to anybody on the panel discussion is based on let's start with racism. From slavery up until this point, have we actually moved forward or we have moved backwards from slavery to now?
Hmm.
Good question, huh?
Yeah, I think this is Jermaine. I think there's been some forward movement. There's been some areas where we certainly have had mobility and some economic mobility. There's been
All right, Jermaine,
you
you've
hear
gone
me?
back and yeah, I hear you now. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah, we can hear you now.
go ahead, Jermaine.
Am I cutting it? Am I cutting on and off?
Yeah, basically, but if you get to a nice location, you'll be fine.
Am I back?
Yeah.
Yeah, you back.
Okay. Yeah. So how you doing? We're in the other room right here. There's been mobility as it relates to economics. There's been mobility as it relates to our place in politics. Um, but I think what a lot of people feel, because the racism has been televised now, that we have our smart devices and we can capture what we as Black and brown people have been experiencing for decades. We can capture it now and post it on an outlet that reaches the whole world. So there is an awakening about the racial injustices, and there is an awakening that we haven't moved the needle as far as we thought we have. And I think there is an awakening that racism isn't as blatant as, men in white coney hats and outfits anymore, but racism and discrimination is a lot more systematic and institutionalized. It's in our education system. It's in our penal system. It's in almost every system because it's in the fabric of this country. This country was this country was founded on slavery. Its economics was founded on slavery, and much of America's original identity was based on, ironically, people trying to leave the tyranny of Europe to come here and terrorize Africans. you know, so I'm excited about where we are right now. I'm excited about this period. When I talk to people who are like in their 60s and their 70s, like my mom, she's saying like she's feeling the same kind of fervor that she felt in the 50s and 60s. Like she's feeling that now when she looks at the march and she looks at the composition of the marches. She's seeing what looked like the civil rights movement of the past. And I think that's really exciting. So I'm excited about what's going on right now. I think it's an awakening in our country that's much needed.
Yeah, but I'm wondering if the fact that it because of what's going on now, I'm wondering the approach has added on because of more people are being involved. You know, I mean, I think the question I'm posing is because do you think because now it's more televised that people are actually getting involved now, or is it that awakening from the white community that's people getting more involved? That's the question I'm posing. Anybody can answer that.
Actually, this is I think it's both. I think it's a little bit of both, or maybe even a lot of both. And I agree with Jermaine. Because things are now uh, at a place where there can be cameras anywhere, and with that being said, there's really nothing that's done in secret anymore. And because of that, more people, of course, are aware, more people are woke. And I also believe that more people are really getting in tune with what advocacy means, whether it directly affects you or not. If it's an injustice, speak up. And I can't say that part, Najee, without also saying that I believe that because the church over the years, since the civil rights movement, has taken a back seat to the moral voice in community, I think that has stagnated the progress that we would have made had we continued on the path that we were on during the civil rights movement.
Yeah, I agree. What do you think about Ames? What do you think about that? About the question I just posed?
Well, I would say that I think I'm also uncharacteristically optimistic based on just the amount of involvement that we've seen just in the last month, especially with young people who are just not having it anymore, and are out there day after day after day, putting themselves in harm's way. I regret that harm is coming to people. I do think that it is a time of opening where there's a lot of opportunity. There's a chance for us to do things differently. I don't, however, I'm grateful for the white people who have suddenly realized that people of color have been murdered in our country for hundreds of years. I think a lot of kind of well-meaning white folks were really excited when President Obama was elected and thought like, okay, so our country, we're all good now. We've come to terms with racism because we've had a Black president. And I should have all foreseen was the backlash that was going to happen from that. Who is the person who is occupying the White House right now and doing more damage than I think anybody could have ever imagined to the Black community and to many marginalized communities, immigrants, women, pretty much anybody other than cisgender, heterosexual, rich white men. And I honestly think that until more white people are having serious conversations about reparations in our country, that it's going to be hard to actually move forward in a meaningful way.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. Achim, being in fact from DC, around that area, you've been seeing a lot more stuff lately. So, what are your perspective on this?
Well, right now I'm residing in New Orleans. But however, I could tell you, even in New Orleans, they have been the protests have been going on. What people have felt, what I see is that white people are saying that the young black youth are saying we are not our ancestors. They're saying that we want equality, but we're not trying to get we're not trying to have any type of um retaliation as far as getting back. We just want our just due respect. We just want you to stop killing us. We just want to be able to walk down the street and live like anybody else. So it's a lot of eye opening on both parts of the spectrum. Um, and as you can see, there's a big difference from when Obama was in office. It was like everybody's working together. Everybody is looking for the brighter future, and we're coming together. We're going to be one. But as soon as 45 come in office, um, his whole campaign trail was hate, 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 hate. You know, and that just sparked the fuel that was already burning, um that was ready to explode, I should say. um and it showed. I remember there was a different feeling when I was in DC and Obama won. It was a
Yeah.
different feeling. It was a lot of people just happy go lucky. They were just, embracing, whether you were white, black, Hispanic, or whatever. Everyone was just embracing one another. Then um when 45 was elected, you could feel the hate, you could feel the tension, you could feel everything that was in the atmosphere. You could also just feel fear on some people, because they was like, something is about to happen, but we just don't know what.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
um to have those two different feelings, it makes it uneasy right now because we don't know what direction this country is going to go. I just pray that everybody get out and vote at their prospective times to try to make a difference. But however, we all just have to come together, and the Black Lives Matter, that's just another matter that we just have to talk about it, because there's a whole lot of hypocrisy when it comes to the Black Lives Matter movement as well, when it's including the LGBTQ community. Um,
That's my
my life
I
doesn't
asked about
matter
that too.
in that spectrum. You might as well say,
Yeah. I
trans women
yeah.
don't matter. I
Yes.
don't know. I might have jumped ahead a little bit, but
No,
that's,
no, you're fine. You're
yeah.
fine. That's exact. I'm glad you're putting that segue to actually go into that topic. I start talking about the Black Lives Matter movement because they don't include us really in that movement. But if we say we are black and not LGBT, they include us in that movement. I'm trying to figure out how to include us in that movement as well. We need respect in that movement. How do you think that we need to move forward to gain respect in that Black Lives Matters movement? Anybody can answer that one.
I People that are in the LGBTQ community, we have to keep on voicing and letting our voices be heard. Um, our community, the black community, have to realize that instead of creating division, because that's what opposition want, instead of creating the division, reach out to the LGBTQ community, because with all of us walking and um, working together, we are a united front. There's numbers. The power is within the numbers. It has been proven time and time again. We do not want history to repeat itself as it was with the Black Panthers, or as it was with different organizations that were coming up, by allowing the opposition to divide us. Even with slavery, they divided us. What did they
Yeah,
use during the slavery time? They used our skin tone to divide us. If you wasn't lighter than a paper bag, then you wasn't allowed in the master's house. So that You had one set of slaves thinking they were better than the other slaves when they realized we're all black. Because at the end of the day, when I walk out the house, you see my blackness before you see my transness. Now, you saying that my life doesn't matter because I'm in the LGBTQ community? No. How you gonna, if a brother gets shot and killed by a police officer, you see him as a brother first before you even know that he's a trans dude. Does Black Lives Matter when it comes to the our trans sisters? Black on black crime? There should be an outrage when it comes to black on black crime. When another person is killing another person, there should be some outrage within our own community.
Yep.
Come on, let's get it together. Come on, let's work together. That is our sister. That is our cousin. We should not be shooting and killing one another. When a black brother kills another black brother, it should matter. We all need to start having that dialogue and stop being one-sided, because you are really actually helping the opposition when you allow these divides to continue within our community.
Exactly.
We have to march together, hand in hand, work together, because like I said earlier, it works in numbers. But if you have all these pockets working against each other, it's not going to work.
Exactly.
And the opposition sees that.
Exactly. I want to comment on what you said, Achim, because that I'm very passionate about that aspect of racism. You show people how to treat you, right? And that's something that we learn in relationships, but I believe that that is something that is prevalent in any situation. So when we talk about Black Lives Matter, we project that as a mantra for the collective to understand that Black Lives Matter. But as people of color, we need to understand that Black Lives Matter first, because what we show people and what we really want, which is, of course, equality. We want fairness. We want justice. We definitely want an end to police brutality. But what is it that we're actually showing? And that's the part that we don't really want to take responsibility for. A perfect example I saw, it was on Facebook, a young man was being detained by the police, but he was aggravating the situation so bad until it just elevates it to a place where now he's actually guilty of doing something. So, we can't contribute. Like you said, we're just giving energy and we're giving play to the oppressor with sometimes the way we act within our own communities and sometimes the way we just act as people of color. So we need to change that perception first. I think that is just as much a part of racism as dealing with your oppressor, because sometimes we self-sabotage. It's us that are acting crazy, displaying crazy behavior that just does not get us a seat at the table when it's time to actually negotiate. When you get the oppressor's ear, you want to be able to sit down and really confer what your true requests are. You can't be heard if you're already perceived as somebody that can't sit down and do that. So I understand that rioting is the voice of the unheard. I get it. I don't like that, but I definitely understand that you cage anybody long enough, they're going to come out really animalistic. I get it, but we still have to sit down and think about what is that message sending to our community and to the rest of the folk that are watching. So we don't want to self-sabotage and make it easier, to have to always come back to racism. We're going to have to do our part. We're going to have to do our part as well as the Black community, as the brown community.
Yeah, you got a good point. I mean, Ames, you can step in anytime you want, sir. This is good discussion.
Yeah, I think echoing both of the dialogues that we've been having so far on this question, I think that unless we are very intentional within our own community, we end up replicating the same structures of oppression that we are trying to tear down in bigger society. And I think we are just starting to really think about, like, how are we dealing with intimate partner violence that happens within our own community? How are we dealing with people who are leaders in the movement who may have allegations of sexual assault? And there's, you know, a real fear that the model minority concept that I guess sort of like what Michael was saying, like once we have people outside our community paying attention to us, what we don't want them to seize on is, you know, the fact that we are being harmful to each other, even though, again, that's simply the same kind of patterns that are baked into the systems that we live in the U.S. But I think we have to start, you know, trying to make it safer for people to talk about when they are in situations of harm, and what we can realistically do about that without calling law enforcement. I totally acknowledge that in many communities, that's the most dangerous possible resolution to any kind of harm or violence that somebody might be facing. So that means that we need to step in as a community and try to come up with safety planning, with ways that we can try to keep folks in our community safer.
Yes, definitely.
I
Yeah,
did.
definitely.
I saw that video that I think that you were talking about, Mike, where the young guy was underneath the police officers, and the black community stood up and they were like, "Look, man, we don't want to see another life. We just concerned about you. Just do this." Because the officer asked the brother if he could help, and they helped him, you know, be out of the situation that could have escalated to something bad.
Mhm.
Is that the video you talking about, bro?
It might be that one. This was a situation where he was being detained. He was asked to sit down. He was just, you know, rendering all kind of slurs and bad language, and just really escalating the situation to a place where, if he was innocent to begin with, you know, now he looks, you know, guilty. So, you know, those situations are things we can change. We can do something different. You know, we can definitely change behavior. But also, to pinpoint Najee's question with the trans community, this isolation period for us is something that I really had to reconcile, because not only are our voices not included in the Black Lives Matter movements, and our trans women being murdered relentlessly and disproportionately. There are, you know, very minimal investigations being done. Wrong names are being used. All sorts of things going on. And so the question that Najee posed is something that really settled deep in my spirit once the pandemic and all the isolation and all the safety precautions got put in place. All I could say, my whole spirit was just saying, welcome to my world. Because in the trans journey, many parts of the trans experience, you're isolated. Just, you know, circumstantially, you're isolated. You know, as you go through this journey and as you transition, sometimes our transitions are not socially acceptable. And that causes isolation. During the HB2 movement, where if you did go out, you had to worry about where you could use the facilities. You know, to have to go out and pay my money and then wonder if I can safely go to the restroom, you know, was the absolute worst. So when this pandemic and isolation came about, shaming came about for people that thought that they may have the COVID-19, they were afraid to go get tested for being ostracized and you know, even further isolated and being shamed about it. So, you know, all I kept saying was welcome to my life, you know, welcome to my community. As people started dying from this, you know, I thought about our trans women and how sometimes every week there's a death in the trans women's community, in our LGBTQ community somewhere. You know, there's some type of hate crime that's not actually reported as a hate crime. You know, so I'm saying again, welcome to my world. You think this pandemic is something? that you're just facing now. We live like this sometimes day to day. So I think us telling our stories, us continuing to lend our voices to answer Najee's question, how can we change this and be a part of the conversations, be included in the campaigns that go forth, we need to talk.
I especially think there are
Yeah.
realities that
Yeah,
people who are not trans are encountering now because of COVID. Like, I guess to put a positive spin on this, some of the solutions that we suddenly found available when white people of means needed to get their diabetes prescriptions filled, like telehealth. Though that telehealth is something that would help trans people, outside of COVID, who have a difficult time finding somebody who would prescribe hormones and have to drive hours and hours. So if it was so easy to make it available, like I said, when white folks were afraid to leave their house to get their diabetes meds, and this is something that is going to lift up everybody if we can keep those solutions in place.
That's good.
Yeah, the problem is, how do we keep these solutions in place? That's the question that we need to pose now, because we have a president that's trying to take everything away. So how do we actively how do we actively put this, actively to say, okay, you know what, we need to put these back in place for us as LGBT community, because we have somebody who's trying to take it all out. So how do we do that?
I think one way to approach it is to never stop fighting. We have a tendency, just human condition. You win one, you kind of take a seat back and you rest and you're, celebratory. We're on the mountaintop, and that's good. But I think that period of time can go on too long, and then we're blindsided. And again, I think that that's what happened between the civil rights movement and now, as far as advocating for justice. The other piece in that is that there is so much of a divide in the faith arenas, because it was the faith arenas that came together that really helped push, from my understanding, the civil rights, time and era. And we've definitely had a breakdown and a major divide there. So we lost our moral compass, for what the society could accept as maybe not legislation, but morally it's something, something should be done. So I think the way to approach it now, we've learned from history, don't let your guard down.
Yeah.
In other words, continue the movement, but not just for a moment, because that's what we have in here. And periodically, when something goes wrong, there's a moment instead of the movement and keeping it the momentum going. Just like when Obama was elected, we didn't keep that momentum going. We stopped. A lot of people, that second election was what had lost everything for everybody, because nobody went out and voted. So legislatively, we have to get people in office that's going to be there for us, and the looking out for not just themselves but for everybody as a whole. We had the person in office who did the work, but the thing is, people got complacent. And they was like, my vote doesn't matter anyway. But as they saw that the votes did matter.
Exactly.
When they got out there. And now everybody is scrounging and trying to survive and trying to get that momentum back. Once we get that momentum back, we got to keep pushing. We got to keep fighting. We got to keep working. We got to do the work. If we don't do the work, then everything that we have in place is in vain.
It's in vain. And I think it was Bishop Yvette Flunder that said this. You have to ask yourself, in advocating for social justice, gender variant justice, any type of justice, are you going to create a monument or are you going to create a movement?
There it is.
That's
There it
the
is.
question that you have to ask yourself, because that monument is wonderful. It's a replica of whatever it is that you're fighting for, and what that stands for is wonderful. But as we see now, that's temporary, because those can come down. If you think about the movements that we have experienced just in our life era, I think about James Brown, I'm Black and I'm Proud. Say it loud. I think about that movement. Give the people what they want. When they were talking about equality and justice, it didn't just center in the advocate community. It went into education. It went into the music industry. They were definitely big on, you remember the sign Black Power. That's a universal now sign for unity. So these are things that we have to ask ourselves. Do you want a monument or do you want a movement?
That's right.
And that's what we need to do. That's the reason why I started this kind of discussion, because I want us a movement, not something temporary, something put in place, just so we can start a movement.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah, that's the reason why the ministry for the city church is so important to me, because I want to start a movement with us, not just city church, but a movement amongst the churches, and and with Ames, I want to use you as with the party, the NC, to start a movement with you. This is why I started this panel. Let's go to homophobia. Where did we go from there as far as homophobia is concerned? Because what in the world going on with that? Why is it going on so strongly that it's creating an issue now?
Honestly, I think that people just feel more brazen about kind of flying all of their bigotry flags right now. The person in the White House, the people in the Senate, the folks who are on our Supreme Court, these are all white men of privilege who feel pride about it makes me feel disgust thinking about it. And I think that that all marginalized communities are bearing up under that, whether it's people who are immigrants who are afraid to wear like folks who are Muslim and afraid to wear the hijab or out in public, or folks going back to the closet in the LGBTQ community. The basis of, the real basis of the LGBTQ movement, we know, was Compton's cafeteria, it was Cooper's Donuts, and it was the Stonewall riots. It was trans people. It was trans women of color who started the movement, but it got really professionalized. And the way that we tried to win people over was to say that you should give us rights because we are just like you. And that worked out great for the people who were just like, cisgender heterosexual society. It did not work out great for people of color, for Black and Indigenous members of our community. It didn't work out well for people who are trans or gender nonconforming in any way. And I think that also is something that our movement is going to have to think about the consequences of, that we made our rights conditional on, being acceptable to the people who are oppressing us. And instead of making arguments that all human lives have dignity and value and worth.
Yeah, but all human values should have dignity and value and work anyway. It should not have regard based on whether who we love in bed. It should not matter, or how we present ourselves in front. It should not matter. Our lives should matter anyway, despite that fact. I mean, where do we go wrong in that part? Where do we go wrong when we feel like that because you're transgender and you're gay and you're straight and you're whatever, and you're Black and you're white? Where do we go wrong? Where do we go wrong there?
I will say one other thing about this, to Achim's point about after the 2012 election. Another thing that happened after the 2012 election was that we got the Obergefell Supreme Court decision in 2015. And honestly, like a whole bunch of gay folks just departed to their second house on Fire Island or whatever. And we're like, I don't need to be a part of the movement anymore. Like I'm not going to go to prison. I don't have any problems with the police. And so, I don't really need to be standing up for other people's rights. I think we're just really starting to see again, just how the systems of oppression are being replicated in our own movement.
Yeah, definitely so. I'm trying to figure out as to how do we get back to where we get dignity again, because we've lost that somewhere in the transition. So where do we go to get our dignity back?
I believe that the dignity becomes from within first. You have to have that self love and that confidence within thyself. What a man thinketh, he is. So if you know on the outside you're black. A lot because it's a lot of layers that we have to deal with. One, by us being black trans men. Two, what exactly what society sees us as men dealing with the manhood. What is exactly is masculinity? How does it define us? What does it look like for us? um but we have to create our own destiny, our own meaning of the word masculinity and what it means for us, and that's where it comes from inside first, before anybody else. What people gonna look at us, we already know people gonna look at us every which way, up and down, but it's up to us to do the footwork. It's up to us to start with us first. And when I say us, I'm talking about the trans men community, because they are looking at us in a ways that we can't even think beyond measure on how they're looking at us. So it's for us to define ourselves.
That's good.
Society has already put out there what we should already look like, we should look, how we should walk, how we should talk. But the thing is, when we show how we are and just be authentically ourselves, that is where it starts. It begins with us.
Yeah. We're having a problem amongst our own community as well with that particular topic you just talked about, because the gay community and the trans community are having an issue with that same topic. Okay, so how do we resolve that in our own community, so this way that there will be a balance in our own community?
By realizing that the issue is not us, it's them. We know that men sleeping with men, it's been a while before they even consider saying that trans men are in that equation. They had our sisters in the MSM, male sleeping with men first. That's one of the things I have long advocated for. I'm like, because by me being HIV positive, in DC, I was told that I was the only trans male that was positive. So I had to go in these gay spaces, that would where I could be educated about HIV, where I could be educated on how to live with HIV, but yet they would push in the scenario of trans women being in that space, because that was something that we all understand, the CDC and all of that, but for the simple fact, in order to save lives, they had to realize that trans men living their life authentically are the can get HIV as well. That was proven. And how are you going to do to work to meet both uh sides of the spectrum? And that is just by having that open dialogue. Because I used to have the open, I was like, well, why can't I come into this space to learn how to live with HIV? And you're putting trans women in there, but you're saying that I'm not allowed in that space. But where do I go as a trans man? No, I don't identify as being gay, but however, I am a trans man and I am a part of the LGBTQ spectrum. So
Mhm.
that's where we have to keep on advocating for ourselves. Doors that they are closing for us, we have to open those doors and have open conversation.
Hmm. I also think
Yeah, that's what we need to start.
yeah, I also think it's a good idea to think about this in a more collective way, because the thing that I'm noticing is that this generation that's coming after us, they are so much more inclined to simply be comfortable in their own skin. I don't know if I'm sure you all have noticed the same thing. Whereas we were always stuffed back in the corner and pushed into whatever society considered to be normal. They are encouraged to be unique. They are encouraged to get in tune with themselves and to express themselves in whatever way is comfortable and fitting for them. So I believe that if we continue on what we are doing and living our lives, because just living our lives alone is revolutionary, that in itself. And we definitely need to, put emphasis there, because just day-to-day living on this journey is, I mean, this is war. This is war, and I am a willing participant, and I'm going to fight every day. My grandmother always said, if you don't stand for something, you're going to fall for anything. So, even if, unfortunately, it cost me my life, I'm going to be here. I'm going to be transparent. I'm going to be open and upfront and willing to say this is what it is. But I also think because we are doing this, we give the young people an opportunity to look and to see what their next generation is of life and season of life is going to look like. Whereas we didn't have as much of that. And it made it harder for us. Many of us came out a lot later in life. Kids are transitioning now at 6 and 7 years old.
Yeah,
So they don't have to wait before they can be influential in society. They don't have to wait to find their voices like we did. So I think as the generations come together, and really begin to syncopate more, I think that we will be a more influential voice in society, and they won't be able to negate us. They won't be able to not include us, because there'll be too many of us, that are front and center.
yeah, I agree. Um, I love this discussion. I really do, guys. This is deep. This deep is what I thought it was gonna be. I really love the discussion. I would like to invite you guys back again. We would like to do a part two of this because I think this needs to be. I need to this conversation to go further, much further than this. We need to find a way to actually get together, to work together, and we need to find a way to do it. So this discussion needs to happen. Needs to be a part two because we need to. Yeah, this is a good discussion, but it's just the beginning, and we need to embrace and just and to educate others on how to move forward. I really appreciate you guys for actually joining me today. I thank you so much, Ames. I thank you so much, um, Michael. For that, you are great. And Achim, oh God, I'm honored to have you.
I am humble, ever so humble for you having me on
Yeah,
this panel. This is a conversation that needs to be had and needs to continue. Like I said, we have to keep the momentum going and not
yes,
have it as a moment, but just a movement
yes, yes.
and make it
Um,
momentum.
yes, I agree. I agree. Um, let's do this again. I'll connect with you guys to do a part two on this. We need to continue discussion. We may have to go into different parts, This might be a part 3 or 4 of this. I'm just saying it might be more of this part 2. Might be a more, might be a part 3 or 4. I'm just, this is the beginning, and I think we need to go further than this. So let's pick this up another time. Okay, I really appreciate you guys for actually being here. It means so much to me. I'm honored to have you all on this panel. I really am. A part of this discussion. Thank you so much for being a part of the discussion. On behalf of the City Church and on behalf of Pastor Marquise, thank you. I appreciate it so much. You guys stay tuned for part 2. This will be a part 2 of this. Good night.
Good night.
God bless.
Y'all.
Good night, everybody. Y'all take care.
We are the City Nation of Charlotte.
We are advocates for
justice, liberation,
compassion
for all people.
Here at the City Nation, we exist to love God, love people, everywhere, every day.
We serve all people in the time of trouble.
If you're facing a period of uncertainty, City Nation is here for you.
Learn more today by downloading the City Nation app or by visiting citynation.org.